Happy New Year! I'm Tina Fordham and you're watching The Navigator, where we look at the geopolitical risks that matter most for financial markets and the business environment. Geopolitically speaking, 2024 was a year of elections and the expansion of conflict. 2025 has sadly started off violently with a major terrorist attack in the US, brazen cyber attacks on the US Treasury, and sabotage on undersea cables in the Baltic Sea. In this episode, I want to discuss how to mentally prepare for the risks and opportunities in the year ahead. Investors remain exuberant about the impact of Donald Trump's policies on financial markets. But if you're running a global business, the outlook is much more complex. Our advice is to avoid the common mistake of focusing purely on what the US will do. Washington is just one part of the geopolitical puzzle. World powers like China and Russia, non-state actors and disruptor states like Iran and North Korea won't necessarily wait to see what the White House does. We should be prepared for preemptive strikes, opportunism, and most of all, attempts to test the resolve of the White House and the cohesiveness of alliances. That means more provocations. It's true, of course, that no one wants to engage in conventional warfare against the US military. So we should expect attempts to challenge and redraw boundaries and rewrite the rules of the game. More on that in a moment. We are putting forward two key PQ terms for 2025 to help prepare you for what lies ahead. The first is norm erosion. That's a political science term for breaking the unwritten rules of political and social conduct. In the absence of functioning institutions and amid low trust, norm erosion is accelerating, decreasing transparency and increasing volatility. Norm erosion, of course, doesn't move markets, but it does decrease predictability and confidence about future outcomes, and that changes the way people behave. That takes us to my second key PQ term for the year, geopolitical denialism. You've heard of climate denialism. Geopolitical denialism is the assumption that geopolitical risks are distant, faraway phenomena. Many of us grew up during the peaceful and prosperous globalization period, and a lack of personal experience with conflict or upheaval can lead to underestimating adversaries and underinvesting in preparedness. Our global risk map for 2025 sets out our conceptual framework for the year ahead. You'll see that we've put Trump's America First policies at the center, as they promise to put global trade higher on the policy agenda than it has been in recent memory, and there's a very real risk of a trade war. Trade tensions could also be a catalyst for some positive changes, like greater European integration. And here, our relatively constructive views on Europe are somewhat out of consensus. Trump's America First policies also mean more wildcards in the mix, like the acceleration of government collapses. We've just seen Justin Trudeau resign in Canada and early elections called in Germany, for example. Turning now to our Geopolitics Navigator watch list, we see most geopolitical flashpoints as broadly priced in, but regionally impactful and still significant. The recent gray zone operations by Russia and China illustrate our caution about more efforts to test the unity and the resolve of G7 and its allies as the second Trump term begins. With that in mind, we're also flagging January 20th, Inauguration Day in Washington, as a key risk. This is where the policy reality will start to hit the road. Markets remain mostly relaxed about Trump's administration, boosted by commitments to deregulation and tax cuts, while assuming inflationary risks mean campaign promises about mass deportations and tariffs won't materialize. We do think markets are too sanguine about the inflationary impact of the Trump agenda and may be underestimating his resolve. One possible silver lining we're paying close attention to is the potential for a UK-EU reset, with both sides facing the same geopolitical headwinds and in need of some good economic news. The February 3rd meeting between EU member state leaders and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is the first such sit-down since Brexit. Although there are constraints on both sides, probably more in the UK, we think the meeting may yield some concrete moves toward cooperation, with the defense partnership the obvious low-hanging fruit. There's a lot more to say, but we are out of time. As ever, remember the words of Louis Pasteur, "Fortune favors the brave, but chance favors the prepared mind." Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated as events in 2025 unfold.